Happy Facilitation Friday, folks. This is Facilitation Tip 19, how to reveal additional causes. So one of the most common questions that I get as a facilitator is how do you know what questions to ask in order to reveal causes or to build your cause map diagrams? Now, there's no magic in this sauce, folks. 3 simple questions. The first one is the most obvious. That's your why question. That's when I tell you to channel your inner 3-year-old during your incident investigations and continue to ask why. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? So start simple and ask why questions. So start there. So say, for instance, we had an impact to production. Why did we have an impact to production? Because we derated production for approximately 6 hours. Well, why did we do that? Because there was a pump failure. Why was there a pump failure? Because of contaminated lubrication. Another question is how? How did that cause produce that effect? And this is where you're going to add a lot of detail in those linear straight line cause and effect relationships. So looking at this pump failure example, it might be unclear to the unfamiliar reader how contaminated lubrication caused the pump failure. So we want to add a little bit more specificity in there. So we're going to ask the how question. How did contaminated lubrication cause the pump failure? And then it becomes more clear that the contaminated lubrication led to the bearing failure that led to the pump failure. So that's the second question in a linear straight line fashion. The last question is a little bit less intuitive. What else was required to produce that effect? So this is when your map will start to branch out vertically with and relationships. So think of a fire example. We had an impact to safety because there was a fire, and the incident investigation tended to focus on the heat source or the spark originally. But what else is required to produce a fire other than heat? Fuel, right? So the fire triangle suggests heat, fuel, and oxygen. So we add fuel and we can add oxygen, all as causes to produce the effect of fire. So by understanding all 3 of those are required to produce the fire, by revealing these required causes, we have a further opportunity to adjust risk of reoccurrence because we can go after any one or several of these branches in order to mitigate risk. Because all 3 of those causes are required to produce a fire, we can eliminate one of them, or to further reduce risk, we can choose to implement solutions around additional branches to further reduce that risk of a fire. Going back to our pump failure example, if we're looking at derated production for 6 hours because we had a pump failure, we can also consider the other items that contributed to that 6-hour derate. Team tells me that there were additional delays performing the repair. So they had this pump failure and then they had delays performing the repair because there was no spare bearing on site. So maybe it would have been a 5-hour derate to production, or maybe it would have been a 2-hour derate to production had we had the spare bearing. So by revealing those additional causes, it gives us additional opportunity to understand where solutions might help us mitigate or offer additional layers of protection. Now keep in mind, just because I'm revealing these additional causes doesn't mean I have to put a solution on them. It's quite the opposite. By understanding what is required to produce these negative impacts, we can actually become more selective. We don't have to go after every single one. But by understanding fundamentally that all of these causes are required to produce this negative impact, we can do a more thorough evaluation of which solutions will get us to the acceptable level of risk. So again, not a lot of magic sauce there. I'm assuming that was extremely underwhelming. But the 3 questions to help reveal causes in your cause map diagrams are why, how, and what else is required to produce this effect. So I hope this helps. Use these questions and let me know if there are any issues or concerns. I appreciate you listening. Thanks.